Onimusha has always been close to my heart. Ever since the first time I played Onimusha Warlords around 18 plus years ago, it has quickly become one of my all-time favourite franchises in gaming. So you can imagine my excitement when Onimusha Warlords was re-released on all platforms back in 2019. Despite it not being among the most famous of Capcom's IPs, I held out hope that Onimusha 2, Samurai's Destiny, and Onimusha 3, Demon's Siege could receive the same treatment, especially with those games perfecting the Onimusha formula. While my favourite remains Demon's Siege, I can understand exactly why some prefer Samurai's Destiny. Both, I'm sure we can agree, are excellent games. Unfortunately, an individual by the name of Ryan, an independent developer under the moniker of Yai Gameworks, also known as Dusk Golem on Twitter, with apparent insider knowledge has asserted that the Warlords remaster didn't sell well enough to greenlight re-releasing 2 and 3. You can imagine my utter disappointment upon hearing this. However, in November of 2020, a pretty substantial leak occurred consisting of what is apparently Capcom's entire release schedule from 2021 all the way to 2024. This schedule appeared to include many titles such as Street Fighter VI, Dragon's Dogma 2, a Resident Evil 4 remake, and even a Power Stone remake. But what also appeared on this list was an unnamed Onimusha game that is slated for release in Q4 of 2022. Now, a fair few people have called into question the legitimacy of this leak, and I would agree that one should view this with a healthy amount of skepticism, especially considering the amount of much wanted games on this list. But there could, however, be some form of legitimacy, given that the PC versions of Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Stories 2 were also leaked before they were officially confirmed earlier this year, as well as the release of a multiplayer Resident Evil, which we know now as RE-Verse, which is only officially revealed during this January's Resident Evil showcase. Regardless, I tend to lean towards this leak being a bit too good to be true. But when bringing to mind the concept of a brand new Onimusha game, I couldn't help but start wondering something. If we were to get a brand new Onimusha game that isn't a re-release, where exactly would the story be taken next? We've seen the entire Onimusha universe span across 2 generations of memorable and well-liked characters. Samanosuke, Kaede, Yumemaru... okay, maybe not Yumemaru. Jubei, Oyu, Eke, Magoichi, Kataro, Nobunaga, Guildenstern, Jujudoma... The list goes on. It was then, however, that I realised that there's a fairly important story that's missing a lot of vital details. One that dates all the way back to Warlords. Something that's slightly touched on further in Blade Warriors, but we don't talk about Blade Warriors. Even though I kinda like that game. Though we are going to be referencing it a fair bit today. With that in mind, if we are to get a new Onimusha game, I believe that we shouldn't get a sequel to Dawn of Dreams, but a prequel to Demon's Siege that focuses primarily on Samanosuke and Kaede. To understand why, let's go through what we already know about these 2 characters. While we know very little of her life before she met Samanosuke, we do know, thanks to the Onimusha Warlords manual, that Kaede was a member of the Iga ninja clan and was tasked with assassinating Samanosuke after he began travelling the world at the behest and pressure of his uncle Mitsuhide. However, after meeting him, she took a liking to him, and due to his good nature, chose to accompany him instead for the next 4 years as a loyal companion, presumably leaving the Iga ninja clan behind. During this time, the 2 began to develop a romantic relationship, though this was only properly hinted at in Blade Warriors. After the events of Warlords, she began searching tirelessly for Samanosuke after he disappeared following the defeat of Fortinbras. Initially, thanks to the Warlords epilogue, it was asserted that she never found him in the end and began to work as an agent for Mitsuhide in the year following Warlords, until she died another 14 years later during a war in Yamazaki province, which would have occurred after the events of Demon Siege, since that war began 13 days after Nobunaga died at Honnouji. As of Blade Warriors and beyond, however, it is confirmed that she did in fact find Samanosuke, though this apparently occurred 10 years after Warlords, and not long after the events of Samurai's Destiny managed to secure a meeting and subsequent alliance between Samanosuke and Jubei Yagyu after Nobunaga returned to life, thanks to a meeting with Kotaro. At some point after this, and before the events of Onimusha 3 in 1582, Kaede, according to an interview with Keiji Inafune, after working further with Samanosuke against the Genma, was eventually killed by Garganto. Now, already there are quite a few missing details in not just the events leading up to Kaede's death, but also in the initial meeting with Samanosuke before Warlords, which is why I think a good point for a new Onimusha game would be one that covered these events and properly bridged the gap between Warlords and Demon Siege. Now, this is obviously my subjective opinion, but I think this is something we've honestly needed since Demon Siege. It would provide further motivation for Samanosuke to hunt down and destroy Garganto, especially since it is made clear in the opening cutscene of Demon Siege that the two have encountered each other on more than one occasion. Perhaps one of those encounters resulted in the death of Kaede. As for Garganto, all we know is that he defected from the Oni to begin serving the Genma during the reign of Fortinbras, but then became the right hand of Nobunaga after the former's defeat at the hands of Samanosuke. We also know that he held a great and mutual respect for Gugen Dantes. Other than that, we don't really know anything. He's one of the few named characters not to get a personalised story in Blade Warriors, even on a second playthrough, with the others being Jujudorma, Jujudorma Ran, Musashi Miyamoto, Kojiro, and Nobunaga, so there was no real backstory for him. I suppose you could also count Mega Man EXE and Zero, but since they're guest characters, there's no Onimusha-based backstory to go into, is there? On top of that, Musashi and Kojiro still get an exclusive boss encounter with each other at the end of their story campaigns, so you could just not count them either. As for Jujudorma Ran and Nobunaga, well, those are already established characters, with Jujudorma Ran simply being a younger version of Jujudorma. The solution to this would, of course, be to make Garganto the main antagonist instead of Nobunaga, with the game further developing both his character and backstory. Following the events of Samurai's Destiny and Blade Warriors, Nobunaga is once again resuming his conquest of Japan, with Samanosuke and Kaede attempting to stop him. Since this would take place between the years 1570 and 1582, many key conflicts could easily be written in, including the conflict with the Ikko-ikki Buddhist movement, which led to the siege of Mount Hiei in 1571, the three sieges of Nagashima between the years 1571 and 1574, and the Ishiyama Honganji War, which spanned 10 years and included many key conflicts, such as the defection of Takeda Shingen, who attacked and captured Iwamura Castle in 1573, killing the husband of Nobunaga's aunt, Lady Otsuya, before she was forced to negotiate a surrender to him, with him later dying after defeating Ieyasu Tokugawa in the Battle of Mikitagahara. This war eventually ended in 1580 when the main stronghold of the Ikko-ikki was surrendered to Nobunaga by Kosa, the son of the chief abbot, after they exhausted their supplies. This could also include the Battle of Nagashino, that spanned 1575 to 1582 and led to the eventual defection of Mitsuhide Akechi from Nobunaga and the death of the latter in Honnoji Temple. Now, if you'll indulge me with what has clearly turned into a history lesson, there's a lot of events to work around that could depict the Genma siege as Nobunaga conquered Japan, and Onimusha has always been loosely based on real-life events, like the Battle of Okehazama and Nobunaga's campaign against the Saito clan. As for story and characters, Samanosuke and Kaede would obviously become involved in many of these events, attempting to fight against Nobunaga and the Genma in many of these key conflicts with the support of the Oni clan, likely encountering Garaganto in some of these conflicts. What this game would focus on, however, is the relationship between the two characters. It would also more specifically depict the events that led to their first meeting before Warlords. We know that Kaede was sent to assassinate Samanosuke, but by whom? Who could have hired her to have Samanosuke killed in the first place? Why would they want him dead? Samanosuke on no occasion has ever really mentioned any particular enemies outside of the Genma and any who ally with them, so we'd need context behind the event and meeting, considering he never encountered the Genma until Onimusha Warlords. Funnily enough, while researching for this topic, I ended up learning that the Ikko-ikki movement, beginning as advocates for self-defense, was actually quite anti-samurai by the time Nobunaga was in power. So, perhaps a member of the Ikko-ikki could have contracted the Iga ninjas. Yes, that would involve taking a few liberties with historic events, but Onimusha has never really been a stranger to that, has it? Of course, once Nobunaga began using the Genma to conquer Japan, the Ikko-ikki would begin allying with other clans and samurai, attempting to promote unity against the Genma threat, perhaps even trying to atone for the initial attempt on Samanosuke's life. As for Kaede, I would argue that after the events of Warlords, it is not outside the realm of possibility that she is considered worthy by the Oni of receiving power much like Samanosuke, and becoming a fully fledged Oni warrior. Given her handling of the sacred knife, it would not be the first time that she has used an Oni weapon, and her constant efforts against the Genma would likely not have gone unnoticed by the Oni. Of course, given her profession, we wouldn't exactly see her using the likes of Enryu or Chigo. As a ninja, she would instead be given weapons suited to her, like sai, nunchucks, or perhaps even a Chigi-riki. Her gauntlet would also probably take on a lighter and less bulky design, perhaps more similar in look to Jacques' slimmer looking gauntlet in Onimusha 3. This scenario could also give more insight on Ieyasu Tokugawa's alliance with Nobunaga. This is a character that has been mentioned on multiple occasions throughout the series, but has never been shown in any physical capacity. It was first referenced in Demon Siege when Akka was telling Jacques about Heihachi, as a family that had allied with Nobunaga. Let's of course not forget as well that Soki, real name Hideyasu, was the second son of Ieyasu, after the latter had an affair with Lady Oman, the handmaiden of his at the time wife. He required an alliance because his wife, Lady Tsukiyama, and son, Nobuyusa, were hostages of Ujizane Imagawa. Once again, at the risk of turning back into a history lesson, let's not forget that Yoshimoto Imagawa was Nobunaga's opponent in the opening cutscene of Warlords during the battle at Okehazama. So, I would argue that Nobunaga would certainly like the idea of defeating another Imagawa given his desire to conquer everything he sees. Or perhaps just to stick it to the Imagawa family in general. What we could also see is the appearance of Kaijiro Maeda, the identity of the adult Yumemaru introduced in Blade Warriors. While he may not be an Oni, he is proven to be a skilled Naginata user. It is, of course, established in the first 3 Onimusha games that one does not require any sort of magic to kill Genma, as proven by multiple characters throughout the series. Kaede, Oyu, Eke, Magoichi, Kotaro, Jacques, Michelle and Heihachi have all successfully killed Genma without any sort of Oni magic or another magical equivalent. In Heihachi's case, it could, of course, be argued that his weapon, named the Genma Tonbo, is why he was able to kill them. But, given that both Jacques and Michel could kill Genma in the same game without magic, let's just assume that he was already capable, and that his weapon was given to him once Tokugawa allied with Nobunaga. Only in Dawn of Dreams was it suddenly established that normal human blades could not kill Genma unless wielded by those with Oni power or another magic equivalent, such as Roberto's exercising beads and Ohatsu's Genma blood, which is a rabbit hole of a plot hole on its own, but we can talk about that another time. Now, don't get me wrong, Blade Warriors has a lot of flaws, and the narrative is certainly not its strong suit. However, that doesn't mean it didn't have a few good ideas. Kajiro Maeda being a matured Yumamaro is something I can get behind. Given that he went with Princess Yuki to travel the world after Nobunaga defeated the Saito clan by conquering the Inabayama Castle and renaming it Gifu Castle, I would imagine that she could also make a cameo as well, even if only verbal. Perhaps she remained abroad while the Genma and Nobunaga conquered Japan. A meeting between the likes of Samanosuke and Jubei in a mainline game would also be quite welcome. The problem with this, at least to me, however, is why would Jubei stop fighting the Genma when Samanosuke continues even 22 plus years after the events of Warlords? That's not counting Dawn of Dreams, which occurs nearly 40 years after Warlords. One would think that given not only his own personal animosity against the Genma and Nobunaga, but also his own blood being literally half Oni, rather than just being chosen like Samanosuke was, Jubei would immediately resume his own fight against Nobunaga. Now this is a question that I never did have an immediate answer for, so I decided to do a little bit more research into the actual person himself. So I hope you'll indulge me with yet another history lesson here, but I'll try to stay as relevant as I can. Born Munetoshi Yagyu, though sometimes called Muneyoshi, he did not actually take the name Sekishusai until 1593, long after he retired to the Yagyu village, giving up his aspirations of being a warlord in the late 1570s and becoming a Buddhist lay priest. He was the father of 5 sons, Munenori being the youngest, born in 1571. He became the disciple of Hidetsuna Kamizumi in 1564, after being sent a challenge to a friendly match, after the latter asked the governor of Ise province, Tominori Kitabatake, if he knew of any capable samurai. Tominori mentioned both Munetoshi and Ine Kakuzembo, a friend of Munetoshi and Hozuian spearman and monk. On another note, despite the parallels, it's not likely that Ine is the same person that Eke is based on, since a person of his name did actually exist historically. Munetoshi accepted, meeting Hidetsuna at Hozuin, and based on family documents and oral history, battled either Hidetsuna or Suzuki Ihaku, a longtime student of Hidetsuna, 3 times over the course of 3 days. While his opponent is up for contention, what remains consistent is that Munetoshi lost all 3 of these fights, and ended up becoming the disciple of Hidetsuna. Munetoshi invited Hidetsuna to the Yagyu village, where they trained together for the better part of a year before the latter left for Kyoto, with Munetoshi devoting himself to his studies. Upon Hidetsuna's return, Munetoshi demonstrated his studies on Suzuki Ihaku, pleasing Hidetsuna, who gave him an Inka Jo, something that signified the highest attainment. This also means that Munetoshi gained official permission to teach the Japanese martial art Shinkage Ryu, which roughly translates as New Shadow School. A year later, Hidetsuna gave Munetoshi a selection of 4 scrolls that detailed the kata of Shinkage Ryu, including commentary and drawings by Hidetsuna himself. These scrolls were collectively known as the Kage-mokuroku. Written in the Yagyu family constitution, also known as the Yagyu Kaken, is Munetoshi's love for military arts since childhood, but despite his study of multiple ryu, he had never known victory. That was until meeting Hidetsuna. Following Hidetsuna's visit in 1567, the two found much work in the service to Matsunaga and later Nobunaga in Kyoto during the years 1570 to 1572, the waning years of the Ashikaga shogunate. Hidetsuna visited the Yagyu village one final time in 1572 before heading east towards Kazuki province, last seen there in 1577. It is presumed that Hidetsuna ended up dying there. It was around this time that Munetoshi, perhaps motivated by the apparent death of Hidetsuna, fully retired to Yagyu village, devoting himself to being a teacher of Shinkage Ryu. Now, I understand if that was a great deal to take in. As I was writing this out, I nearly forgot exactly to what end I did all of this research into a single person. But I wanted to find some logical reason as to why Jubei decided to disappear that kind of somewhat loosely aligned with historical events. Based on the approximate dates of Blade Warriors and Demon Siege, we can at least assume that the events of this supposed new game would span somewhere between 1570, sometime after Kaede reunited with Samanosuke, and 1582, when Samanosuke assaulted the Genma tank and finally destroyed Garganto before he reached Nobunaga at Hanoji Temple. Unfortunately, other than his work with Hidetsuna under both Matsunaga and Nobunaga, there's not much record of his life between 1570 and his retirement later in the decade. I suppose that my best guess would be that he returned and remained in Yagyu village for the sake of protecting it from further Genma attacks until he was able to train others to continue the fight against them. Now that may seem a little underwhelming, but it does make sense that he would feel the need to train the next generation of Yagyus. Perhaps we'd be able to meet the mother of his children, maybe even witness the sparring accident that caused Munenori to lose his eye. We could possibly see his progression towards resenting and even hating the Yagyu after said accident also cost the life of his mother. It is noted that he had other children besides Munenori, and it's likely that he trained them as potential Oni warriors as well. Of course, we all know what happens with Munenori in the end, but it could be interesting to see not only him as a young child learning from Jubei, but his other siblings learning as well. What is interesting to note, however, is that Akane Yagyu, the Jubei featured in Onimusha Dawn of Dreams, is one of the only entirely fictitious characters in the entire series, not being based on any real person. On top of that, not only is Munenori the only child of Sekishusai mentioned by name, but the identity of Akane's mother and father are kept entirely unrevealed as well. I did try to find the names of Munetoshi's children, but out of the 5 that I could confirm were born, I could only find 3 that were actually named: Munenori, Muneyaki, and Toshikatsu. On top of that, I was only able to find the birth years of Muneyaki and Munenori, those years being 1566 and 1571 respectively. Now I bring this up because of maintaining a believable amount of time passing before Akane was born. As of Dawn of Dreams, Akane is confirmed to be around 14 years old, meaning she was born either late 1583 or early 1584. That would make the likes of Muneyaki around 17 to 18 years old, so it would be likely that he was not her father. For the sake of making it fairly simple, I wanted to assume that her father was Munetoshi's eldest, Toshikatsu, but this would also mean that she would have an older brother, since Toshikatsu fathered a son named Toshiyoshi in 1579. However, according to a conversation the player can have between Soki and Akane after stage 15 of Dawn of Dreams. Akane has a brother that is serving under Yukinaga Asano named Kyusaburo Yagyu, but for the life of me I could not find any mention of any Yagyu under that name. In fact, the only person I could find under the name Kyusaburo existed nowhere near the time of Munetoshi. Again, I only bring these things up for the sake of bridging gaps between games in a believable way, and it would be interesting to meet the person who would become the parent of Akane. Given the lack of information, perhaps we could simply say that Akane's father was one of the other two unnamed Yagyus. The possibility of Samanosuke and Kaede meeting Hidetsuna, the man of whom Jubei was a disciple, could also be a highly interesting idea too. Like I said, Blade Warriors isn't exactly a marvel in storytelling, but based on the small interaction between Samanosuke and Jubei, it is implied that the two are of more or less equal skill and power, both holding a clear mutual respect for one another. Given that by this point Jubei would already be considered a highly accomplished swordsman, with his skill historically acknowledged and praised by Hidetsuna, it's likely that there would be a similar mutual respect between Samanosuke and Hidetsuna, with the former recognising the experience and skill of the man who trained the Master of the Blade, while Hidetsuna recognises someone already highly respected by Jubei. Perhaps the two would have a spar, similar to the initial friendly match between Munetoshi and Hidetsuna when they first met. Perhaps Jubei would allow his children to watch, demonstrating the kind of skill and ability that is to be expected from the best of the best, as a way to inspire them. The character interactions in Samurai's Destiny is one of the game's many strong points in my opinion, so it would be nice to see more of that between both fan favourite characters like Samanosuke and Jubei, and new characters like potentially Hidetsuna or even Ieyasu Tokugawa, given how many times he's mentioned. Also, while Munenori never specifically mentioned Samanosuke in Dawn of Dreams, especially since Samanosuke is more or less presumed dead, or at least disappeared by just about everyone other than Aren, perhaps there could be a little back and forth between the two of those as well. As for how the story in this game would progress, I would imagine that it would involve not only the revelation of the Oni's existence to Mitsuhide and the Saito clan, but in a similar vein to Kaede's initial Warlords ending, both her and Samanosuke becoming agents for Mitsuhide as he slowly prepared for his eventual rebellion against Nobunaga. We know that, based on one of the initial interactions with Ranmaru Mori in Onimusha 3, this rebellion hadn't actually begun, though Nobunaga could already see it coming, so the majority of the game would likely involve the two taking on more covert style missions in order to maintain the deception that Mitsuhide is still loyal to Nobunaga. Historically, Mitsuhide became a retainer to Nobunaga on January 4th, 1569, so by the time that this new scenario would take place, he would be working to find a way to destroy Nobunaga from within his own armada. Perhaps the missions assigned to Samanosuke and Kaede were partially to keep the attention away from him while he slowly infiltrates the Oda clan. Nobunaga is, of course, no fool, and would likely catch on after a while, but pretend to remain unaware in order to string Mitsuhide along. Given that Mitsuhide successfully begins his rebellion and attacks Honnoji Temple, with Nobunaga inside, it could be assumed that Nobunaga never went out of his way to stop it, simply believing it to be insufficient to cause him any concerns. Again, with the large time frame between Samurai's Destiny and Demon Siege, there's a lot of room to play with events, but unfortunately I'm not that imaginative. In truth, it took quite a bit of time to properly come up with anything half consistent here, when it comes to multiple plot points and ways to consistently bridge gaps between the already established Onimusha lore. Regardless, I've been rambling for a lot longer than I initially anticipated, so I'll do you all a favour and stop here. What do you think? Do you like my idea of a prequel to Demon Siege, or do you have another idea for an addition to the Onimusha series? Perhaps instead of a mainline game, we could get another spin-off, like Onimusha Tactics, or even a Dynasty Warrior style game similar to the likes of Hyrule Warriors. Now that is something I'd love to see. A guy can dream, can't he? Tell me your thoughts on what you'd like to see and on how my own idea could be improved. Either way, thank you all for sitting through all of my, what can essentially be chalked up to incessant rambling. Take care of yourselves. Danish out.